At this time, constant and continuous abuse was still happening towards me. My birth mother and her husband were trying to learn how to respect me and sort of revere me because my partial hearing loss, being in a social security check, was the only reason that they had money. It was the only reason that they had money for a very, very long time. So when I was 22 years old, I would say, I don't know if I was 21 or 22 when we moved to a different state. And we lived with someone else for a good few months. We had to live with someone else when we moved to the state because we couldn't find a house yet. We did find a new house to live in for the four of us. And the house was bought with my social security money. And I was still being verbally, mentally, and emotionally abused. And I even started getting sexually abused again because my stepfather, he's not my stepfather, my birth mother's husband, would then actually go up me and put his hands on me and still make some sort of sexual jokes to me. And he would still flirt with me. I would say it even changed a little bit because then he insisted that I get special treatment because I was the one bringing in money with my social security check. I wish I had more memories of that, but around this time, I started drinking very heavily just so I wouldn't have to remember anything. Before I started having children, drinking alcohol very heavily when I still had to live with my birth mother and her husband and her son was just my way of coping with things. I figured if I couldn't remember anything until the day that I was able to move out of the house and never speak to them again, I would just drink every day of my life until I couldn't remember anything. And that was my way of sort of essentially losing the memories when I should have been staying sober so I could document things to talk about later on. But unfortunately, a lot of things had changed during that period of time due to me being intoxicated to deal with living with my abusive parents and my sibling who was also abusive. He was also mentally and verbally and physically and emotionally abusive. He was abusive to me. He would put his hands on me. And then there would be my birth mother and husband who lived in the house. Sort of, they were angry with me. They had an attitude with me for no reason. My younger sibling who is being raped and forcefully sexually assaulted by his stepdad, he was still getting special treatment and favor in the home because he didn't have a mouth to talk back. He couldn't speak, so he couldn't talk back. And he was too lazy, so he didn't want to leave the house and do anything. I was always trying to leave the house. No matter what, I was always trying to leave the house and walk everywhere, and that was one thing that my birth mother hated about me. I would always try to leave the house and walk so I didn't have to be in the house all the time. And then her husband would, when I come back, he would always say she's having sex with somebody, she just fucked someone, that they needed to give me STD tests and pregnancy tests and that they needed to give me birth control because I had to be having sex with somebody. Every time I left the house and come back, I was having sex with somebody. Yeah. And we all know it was because he was obsessed with me. He'd been obsessed with me since I was 12 years old. The whole time that he was actively in my life, I had only had sex with a short amount of men. Like, and on your one hand, 5 fingers, my number of sexual partners was put on. My number count of sexual partners before I met my husband was actually 2 men. I've had to sit here and think about this film just for a few minutes because I've had a good amount of boyfriends, but I only had sex with 2 men before I met my husband. And basically in the time period that my birth mother was married to her stepdad, and he was, at the time, he was my stepfather, he would spend years going through my phone. he would spend years going through my phone every day of my life and pressing my birth mother to get me birth control and pregnancy tests and STD tests, insisting that I was having sex with somebody, only to find out that by the time I was 21 years old, I had only had sex with 2 men. He broke out in tears, he cried, he genuinely cried, and then he actually found out from my husband when he was telling him that he raised a good daughter, because she just told me that the number of men she's had sex with before she met me is so low. He believed me at that point, and he believed me at a point before that, where my birth mother's husband, he actually broke down in tears, and he cried, and he said, all these years I was accusing you of being a hoe, and you never were a hoe, because you only have had sex with 2 men. I said, because you've had a crush on me for years. You're supposed to be my dad, essentially, and you just spent years having a crush on me and accusing me of being a whore, and worst of all, you did it right in front of your wife's face. And I'm your wife's daughter. This is just gonna fill up the rest of this video. Wait a little bit longer, because I was just gonna go check on my baby, but that can wait. So the final things that happened in my life, when I was 22 years old, we moved to a different state, and they were still living off of my Social Security disability card, which is a pretty good amount of money. So the next year, when we found a house, and I met the man that I would end up marrying and having kids with. When I was 23 years old, my husband proposed to me, and I still have the Social Security disability check. My birth mother and a husband and a younger son were still taking that money from me. I still wasn't allowed to leave the house and go get a job and date anyone. So I basically, even while I was dating my husband, I would come home to the house that I lived in, and I would get harassed. I would get harassed and told that he's changing you can't go on dates with him anymore. I would have my boyfriend blamed for everything. Their changing personality, the fact that I said I wanted to get out of the house more. They would like notice patterns in my changing behavior or me having an attitude with them, because I'm a grown woman. And I would do whatever I want to now, and that's my money, and I would spend it on whatever I want to. Not only that, I would leave the house anytime I want to. Because technically, in the most humble way possible at the time, but it progressed with so much rage because they were still trying to control me, I paid for the house that we were living in. My Social Security disability check fully paid for the house that I was living in at the time. They knew the information, I would use it against them, and they started hating me and getting so angry at me. And then I reminded them, y'all have spent years living off of my Social Security disability check. How do I not have a right to be angry, because right now I still don't have any freedom? I don't understand. I bought this house for you. This house was bought with my money. I'm paying rent to make sure that you guys keep this house every single month. And now this is my time to move out, date someone, get married, and have kids, and separate from you so I can make my own family, and there is nothing you can do about it. So meanwhile, my birth mother, she was like, you know, getting tired, getting older, and not caring anymore. But her and her husband were insisting, like, we still control you, so you still have to do what we say. I just keep closing my eyes because my camera is so fucked up, and it's getting annoying. I don't know what happened. We're gonna make this a part. I'm going to make the next video a part 3, because this is a little bit long.